let's start with a really unsettling idea. What if that feeling you have right now of being in control of your own life, the sense that you're consciously choosing your next thought, your next action, what if that's all a complete illusion? That's the provocative argument we're digging into today from Sam Harris's book, Free Will.
Now, this is a short book, but wow, does it pack a punch. Harris, who's both a neuroscientist and a philosopher, takes direct aim at an idea that holds up just about everything in our society, our laws, our morality, even our own feelings of pride and regret.
And he really doesn't pull any punches. He just comes right out and says it. The facts tell us that free will is an illusion. I mean, that is a huge claim. So let's unpack exactly what he means by that, and look at the science he's using to back it up.
And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical game. If Harris is right, this forces us to ask some really uncomfortable questions. I mean, how can we justify praising someone for their successes or blaming them for their failures? What does that do to our whole concept of justice?
Okay, so let's start with the most obvious objection, right? The feeling itself. This brings us to our first section, the feeling of freedom. Why does this idea of being in control feel so real, so completely intuitive, every single second of our lives? It really all boils down to this one powerful experience. We feel like we are the conscious authors of our thoughts and actions. It just feels like we're in the driver's seat, steering our own lives from one moment to the next.
Harris uses a super simple, everyday example to pick this apart. Think about your morning coffee. The feeling is that you chose to have it, but he wants us to push a little deeper and ask, where did that desire for coffee even come from? Did you choose to want it?
And this is his core point. Harris argues that the choice was already made for you by all sorts of unconscious processes in your brain. That intention to drink coffee, it just sort of appeared in your consciousness. You didn't create it. You were just the first one to find out about it.
So if our own feeling isn't the whole story, then what does the science have to say? Well, that brings us to Section 2, the case against choice. And this is where the evidence from neuroscience gets really, really weird.
So check this out. This number comes from a famous experiment by a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet. He hooked people up to an EEG and found that their brain showed activity signaling a decision to move a full 300 milliseconds before the person actually felt they had made the decision.
But wait, it gets even more startling. Using modern fMRI brain scans, scientists could predict which button a person was going to press up to a mind-blowing 10 seconds before the person themselves was even aware of making a choice. Think about that. Your brain knows your decision long before you do.
So what all this research suggests is a pretty wild timeline for any choice you make. First, unconscious brain activity starts up and actually determines the outcome. Then, much later, your conscious self, become aware of it. As Harris puts it, you're basically the last person to know what you're about to do.
Okay, so the science seems pretty damning. So how in the world do philosophers argue against this? That brings us to Section 3, a puppet on strings.
Well, the most popular defense of free will is something called compatibilism. It's an attempt to make free will work with determinism, the idea that everything that happens is caused by things that happened before it. Compatibilists basically say, look, you're free as long as you can act on what you want to do. If you want ice cream and nobody's stopping you, well, that's free will.
But Harris has his absolutely killer rebuttal to that. For him, compatibilism is like saying a puppet is free as long as he loves his strings. He argues the real question isn't whether you can act on your desires. It's where did those desires come from in the first place?
And this is where things get really heavy. Section 4, rethinking blame and justice. Because if we aren't the real authors of our actions, how can we possibly hold anyone morally responsible for what they do? To really drive this home, Harris uses a powerful thought experiment. Just look at these 5 scenarios. They all end with a person being killed. But as you read through them, notice how your own feeling of who's to blame, who's responsible, changes dramatically as you go down that list.
That last one, the brain tumor, right? It changes the moral math completely. The moment we see a clear physical cause for the terrible behavior, our sense of blame just kind of evaporates. We stop seeing a monster, and we start seeing a victim of their own biology.
And that leads to a deeply uncomfortable question. If a brain tumor gets you off the hook, morally speaking, then what about bad genes or a childhood full of trauma and abuse? Aren't those just other physical causes that we just can't see on a brain scan?
or even the worst criminals among us, just profoundly unlucky.
Now I know, this all sounds incredibly bleak, maybe even terrifying. But here's the twist. Harris argues that understanding this is the exact opposite of bleak. In our final section, he reframes this whole idea as a liberating truth. Accepting that there's no free will doesn't mean we let dangerous people roam free. Of course not. Harris says it just shifts our focus away from this primal need for retribution or revenge, and it puts our focus on what actually matters, assessing how dangerous someone is, protecting society, and preventing future crimes.
And on a personal level, Harris says this understanding has actually made him more ethical, more compassionate. He argues that when you truly understand the long, complex chain of causes that leads to someone doing what they did, it becomes a whole lot harder to hate them.
And here is the great paradox in all of this. Seeing ourselves as these complex biological systems can actually give us more real-world control, not less. You can't just decide to be happy, right? But if you understand the system, you know which strings you can pull, like realizing your bad mood is just from low blood sugar and all you need to do is eat an apple.
And this brings us to Harris's most mind-bending claim of all. The illusion of free will is itself an illusion. What he means by that is if you pay really, really close attention to your own mind, moment to moment, you realize you don't even feel as in control as you think you do. Your thoughts and intentions, they just show up.
Which leaves us with this final massive question to chew on. If your thoughts and intentions just arise in your consciousness without you, the central you, creating them, then what does it even mean to be a self?